EAUC Senior Engagement Officer, and we have Michael Howroyd from University of Leeds, who is the convener. Bit of housekeeping before we start. As I said, I am recording the session. We've got two presentations. Ben from Hartpury, as you can see on the screen, and then we've got Kamall from KCL as well. We're going to be talking about sort of baselines, about monitoring. This has come from some discussions that came out of the GISMail. And then the second part after the presentations, we're going to have an open discussion. I'll pop the agenda in the chat. So it's an open discussion talking about baseline assessments, monitoring, quantity counts, etc. I'm going to ask you to remain on mute during the presentations, but then please come off mute to ask questions. There's a raise hand function. If you could say your name and your institution, that'd be really helpful. It doesn't necessarily come up on the screen, and for people listening to the recording later, it just is a lot easier if we know where you're from. If you're in a noisy office or you would rather not ask the question verbally, then there is a chat box which I'll be keeping an eye on. And then I think that's it from me. Anything from you, Michael, before we start?
No. Jump straight in.
Okay, over to you, Ben.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Claire, for this opportunity. Much appreciated. So good morning all. My name is Ben Brilot. I'm here from Hartpury University and Hartpury College, and my role as head of sustainability for the HE side of the institution. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what's going on at Hartpury this year, but also try and kind of relate it to general lessons about how to undergo biodiversity baselining effectively. From this picture you can see we're a rural land-based campus. I think actually our presentation following is from King's College, so I think actually that'll be a really interesting compare and contrast between the two different types of universities. The other thing to mention is I'm by no means an expert, so if I say anything that someone kind of goes, oh, not too sure about that, then feel free to correct me. My expertise derives from the fact that a long time ago, in a different life, about 20 years ago, I was an ecological consultant, so I do know a little bit about ecology and biodiversity mapping and the like, but as I say, that's quite old information. We're also an institution that obviously, because of the land management, we run different programs around kind of biodiversity and that. We have quite a lot of in-house staff expertise, which I'll explore a little bit as we're going. So a little bit to explain why we got on this biodiversity journey, in part because we think it's important, obviously, and it's hopefully the same for everyone in the room. But the other part of that is we recently signed up to the SOS UK, Students Organising for Sustainability UK, new pilot, this nature-friendly grounds. So they've recently expanded their previous hedgehog-friendly grounds programme. It set up a pilot for which there is a number of institutions, ourselves included. And a bit like the hedgehog friendly grounds, effectively it's a tick list of these are the different actions of monitoring and positive actions for wildlife and the like that you can be taking, working towards a bronze, silver, gold award over the next 2 years. So that has been, if you like, the trigger for us really to get our work together, and also to be able to present it to higher levels, to go, okay, we're part of this external thing and this is why it matters and this is why it's important, as we'll talk about in a little minute. There are more reasons to do the whys as such, but I think actually for everyone in the room, that's the first important thing is, okay, you want to establish a biodiversity baseline. What have you got on your campus? What might you be able to have on your campus and why? Or estate, I'll use campus and estate interchangeably. So the why really matters, and then the what and the how tend to be more standardized things that are kind of easier, but then the why is the really kind of important bit, because that then leads you on. And as I say, our why was all about the nature-friendly grounds, so hitting the target on the nature-friendly grounds bit. And I'll explain a bit more on our other whys. So first of all, it was that one, nature-friendly grounds. The second thing is because, as you saw there, we're a rural campus. We have a bunch of different land management demands on our campus. So we have sports pitches, we have equine grazing areas, we have farmland, we have woodlands, we have a whole bunch of people who all have different demands on it. And at no point up until now have we had an integrated biodiversity action management plan that said, brilliant, you want to do that, that's fine, but let's consider the wildlife within the context of that decision. You want to put some lighting in your car park, fine, let's think about the bat life, etc. Here is our baseline information, here is how you can better think about managing that relation to those. So effectively what we are aiming to do is, yes, get our Nature Friendly Grounds Award, but using that as a tool in order to establish a biodiversity action plan that is signed off at all levels through the university and college, such that all the land managers, before they're making decisions, have to take into account of that biodiversity action plan. And that's the real value of this for us. There may well be, and that might apply to some of you, not necessarily everyone, but potential biodiversity net gains that can come out of this. So for people who aren't aware, the planning processes have changed over the last few years quite radically, and that's effectively now anytime anyone wants to change land use through the planning process, a UK planning process, I say UK, sorry, principally England and Wales. I suspect things are different as they tend to be in Scotland. And one key part of that now is if you're going to do that, you have to be able to demonstrate that the biodiversity that was on the site previously, after you've done your development, you've now enhanced biodiversity. And it can be on that site, but you can also pay to enhance it somewhere else. And that means anyone who has land that might not necessarily be in the best of condition as far as wildlife are concerned can potentially sell some of the upgrades on that land for wildlife. So that can be a way of funding effectively wildlife positive gains on your own site if you happen to have sufficient land available. Curriculum is really important for us. I've already suggested we have both at FE level and HE level. We have courses, environmental science, zoology, land management courses, all of whom have students who are doing surveys and looking at management plans and the like. So absolutely, these surveys are part of that curriculum, and getting our students involved is essential, as it always is. Curiosity is massive, and don't forget that you will undoubtedly have some people within your staff and student base who are real big ecologists, who are really big into their wildlife. We already have a bird list, not because of anything I've done, but because we've got a couple of really keen birders on site. We've got a bird list, fantastic. So we kind of already have a pretty good idea what birds we have on campus. Again, we need to do a bit of formalization around that, but don't shy away from the fact that you will have people that are mad keen on wildlife. And the brilliant thing is that people tend to be keen on wildlife, tend to be really keen on wildlife. I'll come on to that in a minute. So that's a whole bunch of reasons. For our why, the what and the how, first thing is to say, again, you're absolutely not alone in this. And we have reached out and found some absolutely brilliant people who've been incredibly supportive. Again, wildlife people, really devoted. So first thing is, pretty much everyone is likely to have some kind of county records centre, biological or environmental records centre. They're all called slightly different things. Our one is the Gloucestershire Centre for Environmental Records, and effectively that's a centre that will have all the records for plants, fungi, lichens, animals, you name it, they'll have the records. Generally speaking, they're charitable, but they charge for it, particularly for people like ecological consultancies who are doing this commercial basis. But for instance, we reached out to ours and said, we're doing this as a university project. Would you be willing to share the data? They said, yeah, absolutely, as long as you send us an annual return of what you're finding on your campus. So brilliant. So our starting place is we now have the capability to access that record system of all the plants and animals and whatever else that might have been recorded, not just on our site, but potentially within a couple of kilometers. So again, we know we might not have it here directly at the moment, but if we improve things, well, we know that meadow a kilometer away, likely it will colonize our own meadows if we improve it for the wildflowers, for example. The other thing is there are a bunch of really knowledgeable people that feed records into those Centre for Environmental Records. I'll come on to that in a minute for the second part. The next really crucial bit for us has been a local nature recovery strategy. So again, this is a kind of government-wide piece, which is that I think this is operating at kind of county or city authority level. So I think the London one hasn't quite been done yet, for example. They're still in the process. I think they went out to consult last year. But Gloucestershire, handily for us, literally got published 2 weeks ago. And effectively what this is a collaboration between the council, Gloucestershire County Council, Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust, and a whole bunch of other amazing people, wherein they've mapped the entire county and the habitats across the entire county, lots of it by satellite, but some of it by what they call truthing on the ground, literally walkovers. And they have mapped what is there, but also what is there, the potential for within these particular areas. And unfortunately, I haven't got a kind of zoom in on our campus, but if you were to zoom in on it, you can literally hover over 500 meters square, and it will tell you this is what we believe the habitat is on there present. This is what we think it could be improved on that, and these are potentially ways in which you can do it, and it will hyperlink out. This is the Gloucestershire one. It will hyperlink out to new things. So again, you're not on your own. If you have a local nature recovery strategy already published, brilliant. If you don't, then by all means reach out to them, because they might be interested in actually having universities on board. Certainly ours, we're keen for educational partners wherever possible. The other thing about that is, again, as an external kind of pressure point on any senior management, if we can go, part of this works, yes, it enhances our student curriculum, it makes sure our land management is best practice, but also we're part of something bigger, which is we're part of this nature recovery strategy, and we're working with a bunch of local partners to make sure that we can be part of the wider picture. And the thing with wildlife is always it's landscape level. No matter how large your campus is, it will be part of a bigger picture of the animals and plants that are flowing through your particular area. So it's really, really important to think about that wider landscape. And again, like I say, it might be that you don't have the particular interesting stuff on campus, but it might be it's not too far away. We, for example, don't have nightingales. We've got no records of nightingales, but they're in the local area. And if we can improve our woodland management to that point, you never know, we might end up with nightingales on there. So that's really, really valuable. The other thing about the people within the local nature recovery strategy, we've reached out again to Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust, and we've got multiple different points of contact who can advise us on different habitat management ideas, and have come to campus, and we'll have a little look at what we've got and how we can enhance things. So again, loads of expertise out there. Which gets us then to the first bit of actually finding out what we've got. So within nature friendly grounds, one of the recommendations is you kind of do something like a BioBlitz. For anyone who isn't aware of what that is, effectively it's this kind of, it's a good bit of community science thing, which is essentially on any one site, and that site could be enormous, it can be tidy, you do a 24-hour search for as much wildlife as possible across all the taxa you can possibly do. So plants, lichen, birds, insects, whatever else, butterflies, blah, blah, blah. The idea of it is by doing it in one big bang, you can often make it more outreach. So you can invite in local schools to come and take part in it, do pond dipping or something like that, or a bird walk. And it feels more like an event. It's easier to publicize. It's easier to get people excited about. And the other thing about it, as I say, bear in mind, you can reach out to people and ask them for their time. So we, for example, have the Gloucestershire Naturalist Society, which is a bunch of phenomenal specialists, particularly in invertebrates and plants and little niche lichen species and the like. They are quite often people who are willing to come to your site, because if they might find something interesting and new and rare records, then they love that sort of thing. So always worth finding out if you've got a local naturalist society. The records office can often help putting you in touch with those sorts of people. So over a 24-hour period, so we're doing ours from a midday to a midday, we can do the birds, we can do our plant life, we can do our woodland and tree surveys, we can certainly do various invert surveys, so that insect pitfall traps, for example, butterfly net and butterfly sweeps. We'll do moth trapping in the evening. This is all live trapping, I should say. We can also do mammal trapping, live mammal trapping overnight. So check on our mammal species. We'll put out camera traps. We'll also be doing reptile surveys across that day as well. The evening time, we'll do bat surveys. I think that covers everything we've got. And we do have, touch wood, some kind of lichen experts coming too. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff. Something to bear in mind with that, and we had quite a lot of discussion, is it's a snapshot and it's very seasonal. So we are doing ours in May. May isn't a bad time of year for that, because your plants are about at their peak. Bird life is about at its peak, or thereabouts. Amphibians a little bit past the peak, maybe of what you might be seeing in the ponds. Reptiles, it might be a little bit warm for them in particular parts of the country, but it's the best compromise in terms of we'll like to get as much as possible. But bear in mind, for instance, it's a little bit late in the year for looking for hibernation routes for bats. They're starting to move into their maternity roosts. You're certainly missing a bunch of fungi. Fungi will have a peak in spring and a big peak in the autumn. So if you're looking for a bunch of interesting fungal life, it's always worth looking in the autumn as well. The reason why we've chosen to do a single one is because it does take quite a lot of organization. You are asking for quite a lot of goodwill from different people to come along to these. So that'll be our kind of flagpole thing that we do once a year, but certainly we'll have other things like bird surveys running alongside the year. Throughout the year, we'll try and do fungal surveys early in the year and in autumn as well, potentially running that as part of kind of student induction week. Here you go, get involved in autumn fungal surveys and autumn bird surveys with students. But BioBlitz is a great way of getting lots and lots of involvement. If you're thinking about, okay, we want to survey our birds or our reptiles and this, that, and the other, again, this is where kind of getting into the bread and butter of things. It's a bit easier because there are established protocols for all these things. You will find established protocols for how to survey reptiles, for how to survey birds, etc. And they will be published by relevant authorities, oftentimes special interest groups. So they're oftentimes amphibian and reptile groups. ARGs, you'll have a local county one, you'll have a local county back group, so all of those will know standard protocols. So things to bear in mind, as I've already said, the timing. Reptiles, you tend to be wanting to do it in spring when it's not too warm, and putting out refugia that they'll go and hide underneath and they'll warm up underneath. If you start to get into summer, it gets very, very tricky because they're normally warm enough that they'll have disappeared long before you come across them. They see you coming way before you see them. The other thing to think about is number of surveys, and that comes back to why are you doing this? Do you want to know what's on your site? Is it there or not? Or do you want to know how much of something is on your site? And presence absence surveys, again, you tend to find there are standard protocols of the number of times you would have to survey it before you can establish it's not there, we don't have it, or yes, it's there. But obviously, if you want to establish a population, you're quite often having to do lots more repeat surveys to get a really good picture built up over time of exactly this is what we've got. You might also, particularly if you're thinking about your biodiversity net gain, it's not just about presence absence. It can often be what's called a condition assessment. So that is, for example, if you're looking at your hedgerows or something, it's important not just to know, yes, we've got a species poor or species rich hedgerow, but what condition is it currently? Is it improving? Is it getting worse? Because that, again, might tie into the funding sources and opportunities you've got. The other thing to think about is there are often a bunch of different ways of doing this. Mammals, you've got a whole bunch of different ways, from footprint tunnels to live trapping. Newts is the one that's been most radically changed. The kind of the easiest way still to do it is go out and take your bottles out and the like and put them out at night. But now what's called environmental DNA is oftentimes the established best practice for things like legal requirements. If you don't have the money and the facilities for it, obviously a bit tricky. So sometimes the old tried and trusted methods work absolutely fine. Bear in mind too, there are increasingly AI driven methods. So we've got some staff who have been pioneering stuff around what they call audio moths. So literally putting an audio recorder out in a woodland or something like that, leaving it there for several months, and then recording all the calls over that period, and then AI effectively doing your automated recognition and effectively monitoring for you. One thing to bear in mind too on any of this, there are legal protections for a bunch of species, and you need to be very conscious of those because disturbance of certain key species is illegal and potentially carries a fine and prison sentence. So things like great crested newts, you need a license for. Actually, that's changed slightly. I know that's changed recently, but things like dormice, again, you wouldn't necessarily go surveying for dormice unless you really knew what you're doing. Bats are in a special one. So bats are very heavily protected. So any bats in roost, obviously you would want to be minimizing any disruption at all for that. But weird things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. So bird playback can be regarded as disturbance. So playing back calls of birds to try and find what might be around is actually quite frowned upon. And if it's a bird that's on the red list or schedule 1, then it's completely illegal. Timing can be brilliant. So Mammal Week is going to happen in May, so another opportunity to tie into other stuff. We've recently taken part in the Big Farm Bird Count. So anything you can do, because again, those people will tend to have standardized survey methods. And like I talked here about others you can help, like Naturalist Society, but get as many people involved as possible. And then the last thing, apologies, I've gone way over my time, I think, maybe Claire, but last thing is, how do you pull all that information together? And that is, there's no one single good answer to that, I would say. Yes, Excel files and stuff that's happening in the background, you'll need somewhere a master file that's capturing all this, but a really super easy way that really works well for community and citizen science is this app called iNaturalist. There's a bunch of different ones that do this, but iNaturalist is pretty much the biggest and easiest one, and effectively everyone can download it on their phone. It's completely free. You can take a photo of what you've seen. You can try and identify it. It also has an AI ID feature on it too. And then the really brilliant thing is there's a massive community, and other people will look at your photos, and quite often you'll find a day or two later or a week or two later, someone has had a look at it and said, yes, you're right, that's such and such a bee, or no, I'm afraid actually I think this is the better identification for it. The iNaturalist feeds through to a thing called iRecord. And what you can also do with iNaturalist really usefully, you can draw a little line around your particular campus or estate. And that means any person, if you've got public footpaths like we have across the site, any person who uses the app, if they record something, that's immediately going into your database and you can pull that information off iNaturalist. So we're using it, for example, for our BioBlitz, so that anyone who's on site at the time with your phone, take your photo, upload it, we'll have all those species records. Bit of an issue with it, which is, for example, birds flying overhead. If you're not taking a photo, it's harder to have as a definitive record because it tends to rely on those visual photographic evidence that the AI especially can then tap into. The records office have said they actually want verified records and they would like it in a spreadsheet, so bear that in mind. It's a way of capturing it, but you might need a layer on top of that, particularly if you want to get into how to actually map your campus, and that's a whole different ball game for another day. But hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavor. I know I've gone very, very quickly through that, but if people have got questions, it's a bit of a flavor of what we're doing and hopefully a little bit of help for some people out there.
Thanks very much for that, Ben. We quickly do some questions then. Yeah, as we said, we've gone over a little bit, but and we'll make sure we have time at the end for some discussion anyway. But does anybody have any questions for Ben? While we wait for the hands, we'll have a quick look at the chat then. So there's one in there. Where are we at? How is everyone storing their biological records internally? I guess that's one for the chat. But Alexandra also says that they're trialing the City Nature Challenge. We're also doing that at Leeds as part of the Campus Biodiversity Network. So I think it's a bit of a trial because it is on a Friday for us, which is very poor footfall. I don't know how others are finding that. What else? Swift boxes. That is an interesting point, actually. Has anybody else got Swift callers installed? I know we do at Leeds, but I hadn't thought that they were frowned upon.
We do at Bournemouth. Sorry.
Okay.
Apologies, I've probably muddied the waters on that. I think the calling is if you're disturbing birds who are on the nest, for example. I think if it's Swift boxes and you're trying to encourage animals in to be part of that, no, that's absolutely fine. So it's about disturbance, and obviously if the animals aren't actually there yet, you're trying to demonstrate, you're trying to encourage them in, that wouldn't be regarded as a problematic. So it's only if you're disturbing particularly nesting birds.
Okay, cool. Sky, your hands up.
Hello, I'm Sky. I'm from the University of Salford. I was just wondering if you, I know this is a quick question, if you could have a quick answer to how attendance has been from students. I know that you have said that you've asked your local record centre for their time, but one thing that we're struggling is to get students involved outside of their curriculum. So I was wondering if you had a number maybe of like the frequent students or like high amount of attendance on what you were doing, but that's my question. Thank you.
I think the same as everyone else. We struggle with that outside of the kind of core programs that we run where the students are very kind of involved. I mean, what we've done so far is we've basically tied in all these surveys to tutorial time. So every single time that there's a survey being done, there will be at least a core of 20-30 students who are involved in it, and then we open it up and we're always getting, you know, maybe another half dozen students and actually staff members from across the entire place that are being involved. But yeah, it's always a little bit limited, and particularly in these times where the challenge is actually getting students to campus. You know, we're in the countryside, and for students to visit campus is a specific decision for them of paying for the petrol and all the transport or the bus or whatever else. So it's still that is still a challenge we haven't necessarily cracked. We're lucky that we've got that core of students who have an inherent interest in it, and that definitely helps.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
One thing, sorry, that did come up in Alexandra put a comment about not sharing records. I think there's a really important point on there, and that's specifically, I would say, about badgers, which is, and previously in my working life, if you're doing badger surveys or anything like that, you're lucky to have badgers around the place. Don't put that information out there publicly. So believe it or not, we still have to be careful of badger baiting. So any public records that have links to, for example, where you can locate badger sets are a risk, because you may well find unsavory people visiting those badger sets for nefarious means. So yeah, it's worth bearing in mind there are certain species you don't want to be sharing your information about.
Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, useful tip. There is a question there from Stuart. I don't know if we're best picking this up at the end. About the resources behind it. So is there institutional buy-in? How do you get permissions for the habitat management? So I don't know if we want to leave that one till the end, and then Kamall and yourself can both have a crack at that one. There is one more hand, and then we'll go to Kamall, actually. Sorry, who is it? Can't see. Ian.
Hi there, my name's Ian Armstrong. I'm the Biodiversity Manager at Durham University. I was just really wondering, you may have covered this already, and I do apologise, but how are you storing your own biodiversity records, your own biodiversity data? What's the best way? What's your approach? Because as you can understand, it's huge. If you're looking at over 1,000 species, how are you, first of all, storing that data, and how are you getting that data?
Yeah, and that's a phenomenal question, which I'm afraid I don't have an answer to at the moment. I'm still in the process of trying to figure that out. I mean, I think there's people putting in the chat there about various kind of database uses, and my initial stuff so far has found out there are standards. You can find standards out there of biodiversity records. I can't remember if Atlas standards were one of them. I can't recall off the top of my head. So at some point you have to have a database lurking somewhere in the background with someone working hard to actually shove it all in there and update it and the like. I'm afraid I don't have an answer on that one, and in particular, as again, I think Rosalind's just put in the chat, if you at some point you want to map it, obviously it's going to have to go into some kind of GIS database, which we'll be needing to pull through from whatever database, Excel based or whatever you're using. That's our ultimate thing, is we want to get that GIS map so we can put, for example, layers on it. We can put public walks on it that people can then pick up on the wildlife. But certainly our records office, for example, have asked for an Excel based spreadsheet, essentially. So they've said annually, we want a return on our spreadsheets here. So that they're taking that in. I know they as well, they do take in iRecord. So annually they will pull those in, but they only accept recordings on iRecord that have been expert validated, so validated by someone who already has a standing within iRecord, and then their own experts tend to review them as well. So it's not as useful for them, the use of iNatris. You do have to kind of duplicate effort, if you like, but it's a bit of a
so is that taken from a baseline survey where you put out basically what you have in your first year and then do multiple surveys after that on an annual basis or biannually to then update that baseline to see if you've moved forward or backwards from that baseline?
Yeah, we'll have to do that. And the issue with the baseline monitoring is obviously, you know, especially what's the phrase these days, climate weirding. The climate weirding we're getting, if we're happening to have an incredibly hot spring one year and not the next year, for example, doing the BioBlitz every single time a year, it can be a good bet. But if you've got radically different climate conditions between one year and the next, it's going to be tricky. So it's all a bit of pragmatism. Someone asked about resourcing. We all know people are generally doing this out of goodwill, and that's the tricky bit. If you wanted to do it as a continuous monitoring exercise, either you want it automated, so that's why the automated AI-based stuff is going to be increasingly the way that it's happening commercially, for example, on farms. But otherwise, it's talking about a lot of ongoing monitoring to make sure you're really capturing things, because most of the interventions most of us can make are going to be relatively small. If you're talking about Swift boxes, for example, actually that's fairly straightforward in that we can go, okay, we've got X number of boxes used and we can capture that from year to year. So some things on very targeted species are a bit easier. If you're talking about your overall biodiversity assemblage, that's going to be trickier. That will probably take a lot of work. So I guess focusing on the key species you want to encourage is the way forward really on it.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Ben.
No problem.
Very, very conscious of time, and even though we have an hour and a half on this, I know people tend to dwindle off after an hour. So I want to quickly hand over now to Kamall for your presentation, if that's okay, Kamall.
That's absolutely fine, Michael. Is my screen share working? So do you have my slide?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, we can see the slide.
Okay.
All good, thanks.
All right, so I'm Kamall. I'm a student at King's College London. What is a baseline survey? Well, in this context, a baseline survey is a snapshot of biodiversity value of a site at a given time as measured with the biodiversity net gain strategy metric. I will endeavour to go through the process of conducting a baseline survey using an example from my thesis. This is Two Tree Island, a site being managed for conservation value. However, a baseline survey could be conducted with any number of methods other than the BNG metric. The term is taken off alongside the development of the DEFRA metric and the BNG process. The application of the BNG process begins with the mitigation hierarchy. The mitigation hierarchy should be applied early in project implementation. Its objective is to avoid and minimize impacts to the environment or compensate for losses. Essentially, the mitigation hierarchy seeks to avoid, minimize, remediate, or compensate for biodiversity loss. Embedded in the BNG policy is the statutory metric. There have been several iterations of the metric, but essentially this is an Excel calculation tool that determines biodiversity gains and losses to enable developers to demonstrate the mandatory 10% uplift of biodiversity that is now a requirement for planning permission to be granted. This is legislated for in the Environment Act. In terms of planning permission, the baseline survey is a survey of biodiversity using the net gain process at a point before works begin, so it is a measure of what is on site at commencement. The baseline survey is then compared to a post-development scenario using a net gain plan that accompanies the planning application. The net gain plan needs to show how the project will deliver the 10% requirement. The baseline survey, however, is often used outside of the planning system to determine the value of a site in terms of the BNG unit, which is the core result of the metric process, as well as determining the BNG unit scores of each contiguous habitat parcel. BNG process will define habitat type, condition, area, strategic significance. Strategic significance is a multiplier that is added if the site is part of a local nature recovery strategy. In order to demonstrate how to do a baseline survey, I will take you through the metric with an example from my MPhil. This is a site called Hartpury Island, which is a nature reserve in Leigh-on-Sea, Essex. The red line boundary of the site determines the extent of all habitat and urban features that are present. A preliminary site visit allows us to determine, this is the red line boundary at Hartpury Island. A preliminary site visit allows us to determine the extent and type of all habitats on site. The metric uses habitat definitions based on the UK HAB definitions with a few differences. A map can then be produced that will document separate habitat parcels based on type and condition. From the map, we can deduce the area of each habitat parcel. I use Google Earth, but many people prefer QGIS or ArcGIS or Choreo. A second site visit is then undertaken to assess the condition of each habitat parcel. This is done using condition sheets that are specific to habitat type. This slide shows a condition sheet for the scrub habitat type. From this, we can see that there are 5 criteria for this condition assessment. Scrub habitat type. The parcel represents a good example of its habitat type. Seedlings, saplings, young shrubs, mature, ancient trees present. C, there is an absence of invasive non-native species. D, the scrub has a well-developed edge with scattered scrub. And E, there are clearings, glades or rides present within the scrub. So if that habitat passes all 5 criteria, it will be assigned a good rating. 3 to 4 passes yield a moderate rating, whilst lower than a 3 results in a poor rating. This process is repeated for each habitat parcel. Habitats of the same type but different condition could be separated, as with habitats 4.1 and 4.2, the blue and lilac on the right-hand side. One of good condition, the other of moderate condition. Also important to note is that hedgerows and rivers and streams are treated separately in the metric and measured in kilometers rather than hectares. For watercourse features, an entirely different system is used to produce condition ratings. This is known as the Morph River Condition Assessment. But there are no rivers or streams at this site, so I won't go into this, but it is a lengthy process needing site visits and desk study. Once we have all the baseline data, we can put this into the statutory metric, and you can download the tool and user guides from DEFRA. This is the start page of the metric calculation tool for this site. We can see that there is irreplaceable habitat. This is salt marsh. Irreplaceable habitat does not generate units. and should be considered untouchable. However, in theory, its loss can be compensated for with what is called bespoke compensation. This is the main menu page of the calculation tool. Here we can see that area habitats, hedgerows and watercourses have separate procedures, and the row of on-site baseline options on the left are what we need for a baseline survey. This is the main data entry page of the metric. In this example, we have selected the heathland and shrub from the broad habitat type tab, and this has generated options for habitat type, which you can see in the drop-down box: bramble, gorse, hawthorn, hazel scrub, lowland heath, mixed scrub, etc. So this shows the same data entry page, which has some of the habitats from Two Tree Island. Please note that distinctiveness score is automatically allocated according to habitat type. Distinctiveness is important when compensating for lost habitat. Habitat of the same or better distinctiveness must be used. The principle is like for like or better. This is the other half of that Excel page. Of note are the compensation not required for urban features, car parks in this instance. But this is also where the BNG units per unit parcel are displayed. This is the final results page of the baseline survey for Two Tree Island. We have a total of 5,011.93 area units, 2.39 hedgerow units. There are no watercourse units. Lagoons, lakes, and ponds are treated as area habitats. So now we have a few pictures of the site. This is the coastal lagoon at the west end of the site. This is habitat extensively used by migrating birds and is a designated Ramsar site. This is one of the ponds at Two Tree Island. Very good bit of habitat there. This is a feature known as the egret pools at Two Tree Island, named because egrets regularly nest nearby. There are concrete lined tanks. These are concrete lined tanks that are now a highly eutrophicated set of ponds. They are a remnant of the time the site was used as a sewage plant. So the use of baseline surveys as a measure of habitat quality, or perhaps more accurately, the significance of a habitat, is widely adopted. Habitat of higher BNG unit score may arguably be considered as of better quality than one of a lower unit score, but how this is reflected at species level is not always clear and rarely documented. My use of invertebrates and ecoacoustics has shown that acoustic indices are correlated to habitat type, but I have not shown that BNG unit scores are correlated with species demographic data. I am looking again at my analysis and will compare BNG units across different habitats and determine any correlation between species data and BNG scores, and how these methods can contribute to the goal of mean net loss. So that's it. These are some further information there for Natural England 2 references. That's it. That's how to do a statutory biometric survey.
That's great. Thanks, Kamall. Does anybody have any questions? People are always so hesitant, but they always end up putting their hands up. No? Okay. I mean, I guess, oh, sorry, Rosalind. I knew somebody would. You just kind of have to be patient.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear a bit more about what acoustic indices you were using, Kamall, because we're quite interested in trying to use them as part of a long-term monitoring program.
Well, I'm sure you probably know already that most most papers have said that acoustic indices are limited in their ecological inferences. but I've found ACI, acoustic complexity, NDSI, normalized difference soundscape index, and bioinformatics index. They're the most sort of relevant in terms of what they can infer about biodiversity. So yeah, they're the three I'm using: acoustic complexity, normalized difference, and bioindex.
Did you consider using them sort of like for individual species, because rather than the kind of whole?
No, yeah. I mean, ACI is arguably an indicator for avian occupancy. The BI index is sort of a measure of how much biophony is present. So in that sense, a measure of the level of occupancy again of vocal animal assemblages. And NDSI, the other one, is a ratio of anthrophony to biophony, so a measure of the degradation of a habitat in areas of high anthrophony.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Rosaline. Any more? Okay. I mean, thanks again, Kamall, for the presentation.
That's all right. Sorry for my nerves. I was all over the place. I wasn't expecting that.
No, it's great. I mean, I guess we're all sort of on this journey at the moment, I think, and at varying degrees along the path. So it's really useful, I think, to share what we're all up to. I mean, I know at Leeds at the moment, we're looking at still doing this BNG baseline, but also how we can achieve 10, 20, 30% uplifts across the sites using that. But then also we're doing our first BioBlitz this year, so we're quite excited about that. But I think it's all a journey for all of us, really. So yeah, I think it's really valuable to share this knowledge. One question that did come up earlier that I am quite interested in is around how you get buy-in institutionally. I know at Leeds, some of it's easy, some of it's harder. I tend to try and link things to climate wherever I can, because that seems to be a way of getting supportive. We can link to the wider sort of ecosystem services. But I just wonder what other people might do on that, because that's quite an interesting question. Do you want to go first? Come on, Ben.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I mean, the thing I've found is that lots of people in the right places, at least on the land management, are keen. They're happy to be involved. All the land managers, that they want to do it in some respects. It's just getting the exec buy-in. And I guess my take on exec has always been they care about the bottom line. So if there's any funding, or especially for things like BNG, if they're about to be like us, we're about to build 2 new buildings, great, we can save you 20 grand because we can do these other biological, environmental work somewhere else on campus, and we'll save you your BNG offsetting. That's always a positive. I think external factors of recognition, like the and I can see Emily posting about nature positive universities and the like, and that's partly why we signed up for the nature friendly grounds as well, because it's an external marker and a bit of external pressure. And I think the other thing is student curriculum wise, if there's anything that wherein you can get the student engagement, enrichment of the curriculum and be going, it's harder to quantify, and that's always a problem with student engagement, is being able to say how much has this contributed to a positive NSS or something like that. But that's the kind of pressure points as student experience, anything financial, and yes, as part of the wider sustainability strategy. But as we kind of know, particularly in straitened times, stuff that costs money is less impetus behind it, rather than stuff that brings in money. Yeah, but that's my 2 pennies worth anyway.
Anybody else? Very quiet group today. We're normally much more vocal.
Scared them into silence.
I think that must be what it is. Yeah, maybe it's because it's Monday. We had this discussion earlier. We were trying to decide whether Monday was the best day. I think we need to start with an air horn or something.
Hi, it's Ginny here.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Ginny from Cranfield.
Hi, Ginny.
Hi. Sorry, here I am. So I was busy with some things, and I unfortunately missed your presentation. So I'm very sorry. I hope it's been recorded so that I could hear it afterwards. So that's great. So yeah, I will catch up on that. I found in Cranfield we've tried to get a baseline condition assessment for our campus, and we've got that now. So we have made some progress. However, my concern is that those sort of estate managers who are, as you say, like looking for ways of financing things, are only really interested in where they have to do something for planning. At the moment, we've lost a bit of an area due to a development, and the conversation was entirely around, how many points that would, we would need, to secure in other areas. And the university is quite keen to develop sort of a net gain positive area, that we could say, yes, we're going to dedicate this for 30 years. But they were also very reticent about, even though they knew that would mean that there would be potentially funding and so on, but they're a bit reticent about letting anything be out of action, as it were, for 30 years, and that they could not be developed on. So whilst we want to use it to improve diversity across the campus, it's not the tool that we thought it was going to be. So we've got this baseline, but tweaking it to see how we can improve it somewhere else, it's difficult without that commitment, that sort of 30-year commitment. But then if we wanted to improve it without that sort of commitment, but just sort of uplift the biodiversity, they're also saying that actually we don't want to do that, because we only want to do it if it's going to give us positive points. So it's almost like they're happy to do it in one or two areas, but it's almost like it's become worse for our biodiversity improvement process, because it's sort of almost made it stick. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. What do others think of that?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just wondering what others thought of that,
Yeah.
whether others experienced the same kind of thing.
Well, nature is a dynamic process. Establishing a baseline using things like bioblitzes and species surveys, species demographics, that's always going to be in flux, as it were. Some days you might find so and so present, and other days. So it is spatially and temporally, a dynamic system. So again, that advocates for monitoring over time in order to see trends and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, setting a baseline is it's vital. A step in the right direction, as it were. But we do need to keep a sort of I was going to say realistic, but a scientific approach to biodiversity management and monitoring.
I wonder, how many of us have got biodiversity policies that are specifically aimed at biodiversity? So at Leeds, we have what we call a biodiversity standard, and I've deliberately framed that to sit within our environmental management system. So that is something that is audited as part of the ISO 14001 certificate. And that seems to be my way in that, if we want the certificate, which supports, getting extra funding in and all the rest of it, and it looks good for students and all the rest of it, that badge comes at a price, and the price is that we adhere to the biodiversity standard. So that's my approach. I just wonder if others take that.
That actually sounds
well.
better.
Yeah, well,
The
it's
water
just a
bill.
way that by doing it that way, it's kind of like, look, you're doing it because the university's created the policy.
Yeah.
And if you don't adhere to it, then it flags up as an issue on your EMS. Sorry, we've got a hand up there. Can't see all the names. Rosalind?
Yeah, we have something similar. I think, I mean, I feel really lucky because we have really strong institutional support and buy-in. Historically, that wasn't always the case. There was quite a big campaign by students, which, because of the importance of sort of student engagement and staff, actually, academic staff and students really pushed for the declaration of a climate and ecological, or that's actually called the climate and environmental crisis, but they included environmental, and that sort of covers off biodiversity. So mobilisation from those sectors of the university, students and academic staff, was really important in the early days of getting institutional buy-in. Signing up to the Nature Positive Universities Alliance, that helps, because then we have a nature positive strategy and we have a target, and then that target feeds in, is now logged in our EMS. So we now do get audited on it. So we have a slightly different approach in that we don't have a biodiversity standard in our EMS, but we do have the targets from our nature positive strategy in there, and we're working towards actually having a environmental protected species standard in the EMS as well. So yeah, that's just, yeah, that's sort of how we've kind of gone through that process.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the way to go, doesn't it? To sort of, you know, link it in with other things that institutionally you've committed to. Ian, I think you're next.
Hi, at Durham University, we have our, can you say that document? It's our own biodiversity strategy.
Yeah.
Which really sort of steers how we move forward as a university, where everything is sort of centered around the delivery of the strategy, and it goes into different departments ideally, but it really sort of, everything is sort of, this is at the core for us to deliver towards our 2032 deadline, so to speak, where we've set out at start of 2022, we have until 2032 as a commitment to where we're going to deliver on improving biodiversity across Durham University's estate. Now, part of that is the initial baseline survey, which we used the Natural England metric 4, I think it was. So we did do the baseline, and we've just had the 2025 sort of the biodiversity assessment again to see what has happened with that metric. We've done fantastic in some cases, but we've gone backwards in others, and we've actually lost units due to development on the estate. So it's a really good tool when you're managing somewhere large like a university estate of 252 hectares. And it's quite a diverse estate of different campuses, different land uses, lots of woodland, lots of meadows, lots of amenity grassland. So it's quite a good way of seeing how far you've gone in such a short short length of time, really. But certainly our strategy is key to everything what we do. It drives everything what we deliver.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, Gina, did you say you had baselined already, or?
We do, yes.
Yeah, Gina, did you? Can't remember whether you said you had already baselined. Don't know if she's still there. Oh, but yeah, yeah, just reinforce. Yeah,
so I just say something about Ian's comment there.
Yeah.
The metric is statutory metric now, not metric 3 or 4. But yeah, you know, it's a good proxy for biodiversity. It's designed to be a proxy for biodiversity, so that the implication is that these BNG units are indicative of habitat type, but also the biodiversity that inhabits, or the food web that belongs to that habitat type. So yeah, it's a proxy for biodiversity. I think it works well, but obviously it will remain to be seen.
Yeah, fair enough. Gina, I don't know if you heard my question. I was just saying, had you already done a baseline? I can't remember if you'd said.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, we did.
Right, okay.
We did it over last summer.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got an airport as well, so we've got a really nice
Yeah.
airfield, full of bee orchids and pyramid orchids. It's really beautiful. But they are, you know, they just want to keep the grass down. You know, that's all they want to do with it. But so we can't really do any improvements on that because of the sort of bird strike issues and things like that.
Sure.
But yes, we did do a one. Yeah, we've just had the report recently, actually, because we had a few problems regarding the GIS and, you know, making sure that things were in the right layers. And also, if you're doing a baseline survey of the whole campus and you've got trees, then if a tree survey would be very helpful, because that keeps the cost down. They need to measure around the girth of all of the trunks on every single tree, every single standalone tree on the campus, to get the correct information on, you know, on single trees, unless there's a group of trees, in which case it's not quite so much. But yeah, that did take some time as well.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And that is.
But we used a consultant. We wanted to use students and get sort of a bit more of a living lab approach. But because there was a planning need at the time as well, you know, our development team got involved, and we just ended up using the consultant that they usually use, who do have experience in, you know, net gain assessments and so on, from a development point of view.
Yeah. I noticed Ben's written in the chat there that he surveyed the Cranfield airfield about 20 years ago for badgers.
Oh,
yeah, just a
did
curious
you?
link. Yeah.
For what? Sorry.
For badgers, when I was consultant, they had a massive badger set about 20
Badger
years ago in one
yeah,
corner of it.
Yeah.
Badger
Terrible
gate.
trouble with badgers.
Yeah, it's a curious connection. Yeah.
Yeah, because we like them, but, you know, part of the university loves them and part of the university wants to keep them off the airfield, you know, so it's a difficult balance.
Stop the plane, there's a badger on the airfield.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Emma,
So it's only relevant if they're flying, you know, really early in the morning or late in the evening. You know, if it's daytime, it's fine.
Sorry, I think that's really funny. Okay, Emma, your hands up. I think you might be on mute. Don't know if I can unmute you from here. Let's try.
I don't think she was on mute. I think now she is, but I think it's the headphones. But I'll unmute you.
Technology, gotta love it.
Yeah, we were doing so well. Yeah, we'll come back to Emma.
Okay, no worries. Has anybody else got anything they want to pitch in at the moment? I mean, I'm just conscious of time. I'm conscious that everybody probably wants to grab some lunch at some point, but we had put a couple of other, I think Claire had put some extra points there on the agenda just based on the conversations that we've been having in our chat over the last couple of months or so. Is anything in there that people want to Nicola?
Hi, this is kind of getting away from the idea of baseline, but I put an email out to everyone earlier, sort of in December. We're looking to manage our rodent. I don't want to use the word infestation because they're not infestation, but we had few too many rodents on site last December, and we're looking at introducing a natural way of keeping those numbers down. We looked at birds of prey, hawks, etc. I got some response from various people, so appreciate all of that. But I thought I'd ask the question again to this call. Does anyone have any ideas as regards how we could manage our unwanted vermin population in southeast London. Yeah, we're right beside an airport, if that helps your decision and answer. All right, thank you.
Cool. Okay. If any other hands up are for answering that question, feel free to hop in.
Yeah, mine was.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah, so one of our students who was really knowledgeable on this type of stuff, that she's recommended planting lots of like sort of smelly plants like wild garlic and mint.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that sort of thing, and that's like a nice little natural approach to it. We haven't actually tried it yet, but she seemed very adamant that would work. So we are looking to try that. And those things are also very sort of easy to, they can go a bit AWOL if they're left sort of unmaintained, but they're quite strong in terms of survival.
Fantastic. Thank
other
you.
than that, in our sort of external bin compound areas, I don't know what your sort of campus is like, but we've added some signage onto the bins for our students, and it just says help us. I can't actually remember what the exact message is, but it's something like help us to control the rat problem. You know, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's making the students aware that they have a role to play as well, and like through the waste disposal route.
Yeah, okay, definitely.
Yeah,
on that. Thank you. That's really helpful.
I must admit, at Leeds, we really struggle with people seemingly doing the right thing by putting out lots of bird feeders and things like that, and I'm constantly having to get them to take them down.
Yeah.
Because people are trying to do the right thing and actually not.
Okay.
Is anybody else wanting to hop in on that conversation?
I've got one anecdotal situation where we used to manage a waste yard, and we actually went to compactors. So we found that the pest activity in the area, when it was contained within a compactor, went down almost overnight. So I appreciate it's not going to work in every situation, and that's just based off one situation that I found, but just found that containing it within a compactor, we found there were benefits with exchange rates, and again, this isn't going to be for every situation, but we found that helped just containing it.
Yeah.
But we also had foxes on site, so making sure the foxes were kind of not disturbed and they kept on top of it. But yeah, we found the containment element of it quite helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, we've reminded everyone to keep food waste secure and covered, as well as the food in their offices, etc. We did look at getting hawks and owls and the like, but we couldn't actually get someone to come on site and review our site and come up with some ideas. Also because we're restricted in what we can use because we're right beside London City Airport. So yeah, lots of suggestions. So thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the chat as well, Nicola. There's also something from Stuart there about scented oils. Worth a try.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Could I just very quick? Sorry, I put my hand up for another read. Could I just very quick ask a quick question to the group as well, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just in terms of the biodiversity strategies, would anyone be happy to just share them on the chat? Because I'm looking at kind of getting one going for us. It'd be just good to get some examples, if that'd be okay. That was it. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, Emma, are you any further along with your technology?
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
Yeah. There we go. Sorry, I forgot my headphones and I stole a pair that obviously weren't working. I was just going to share a bit about. So sorry, I'm at the University of Oxford, and I was just going to share a bit about what we were doing for baselining. So I'm sort of taking us back to the old conversation. Yeah, we had a baseline done on the BNG metric for our whole estate, and it was mainly done on like a desk-based assessment, but also like informed by a load of on-the-ground surveys. And I think initially we were thinking that was going to be our like measure of being nature positive on our estate over the next 10 years. But then the more we've looked into it, it makes us a bit nervous. Well, it makes me a bit nervous because I think it's quite often quite blunt as a tool, and I feel like we can't really fully necessarily see all of our gains that we'll be doing through the use of just BNG. So I think what we're going to do is maybe use like and also we've had concerns raised, I suppose, that I guess 1 year a hedgerow might count as a hedgerow, and then the next year a different ecologist will do it and it won't count as a hedgerow because it'll be the gapping will be too different or whatever. So there's quite a lot of variability between ecologists and doing B&G surveys. So it's just like a bit tricky, I think, for, I don't know, it makes us a bit nervous. I think what we're going to do instead is have the habitats like types as sort of like a baseline for the whole estate, and then and sort of do that at quite a high level of extent. And then we're picking different areas all over the estate, which we're doing a little bit what sort of stuff that Ben was talking about, where we're going to do like consistent ecological surveys for like indicator species or like botanical species. And we're going to try and do those every few years over the next 10 years. And then that's going to be our main way of measuring whether we've improved our estate or not. And I'd be interested to know if anyone else is doing anything similar, or if that's a terrible idea, or yeah, it's interested to hear people's thoughts really.
May I?
Yep.
Yeah. Biodiversity surveys. Choose what what species you want to look at. I mean, you might want to do a BioBlitz, try and find out what everything that's there, or you might want to focus on, for example, invertebrates or ecoacoustics is a good, fairly new method for measuring biodiversity using acoustic indices. Invertebrates are good because they're ubiquitous. They have species of invertebrates, spread across pretty much every habitat type or ecosystem. Yeah. So they're good to use in comparison with other sites.
Yeah, I think we were planning on doing like a botanical survey, a dung beetle survey, and a butterfly survey as the minimum for each site, because I guess birds are quite variable, aren't they? And so are bats. And then where there are ponds, we'll do newts, I think is what we're planning on doing. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Koye, I think you're next on the list.
Hi, this is probably a very long discussion question, but it's around, we've just inherited some brownfield land that's come back into our possession, and I'm acutely aware that the English counterparts have had more experience of dealing with biodiversity net gain and how we can manage it for biodiversity, because I'm getting a lot of pushback from the estates team on leaving it as, I suppose, biodiversity sparse as possible, because it's earmarked for development, just not in the short term. If anyone has any insights and creative ways of getting past their estates team.
At your peril would be my advice, but if anybody's got any, I'd say just hop in, because we've got a bit of a queue of hands, but I'm not sure that these hands will be answering this question. So
I think looking at relocating stuff, but when you get closer to the point of when the works are supposed to begin. So yeah, I mean, I would start. I don't know much about relocating animals, but certainly, yeah, if you're developing a site and there's wildlife there, and you want to mitigate for it, relocating animals on an individual basis is possible.
Anybody else want to hop into that one? I mean, obviously the chat will probably stay open for a bit afterwards, won't it, Claire? So
just on what Koye was saying, rough grassland is a very simple habitat to create. It's a very easy habitat to maintain, and it does get some quite good biodiversity gain. It provides cover for mammals, cover for lots of invertebrates, and you're not putting capital into its creation and restoration. So I'm being very careful because we have situations where parts of our estate will be similarly earmarked for future development. So we wouldn't want to create, say, a woodland on that site or anything that was going to be a permanent habitat feature. But something like rough grassland, where a simple cessation of a mowing regime can end up with tremendous kind of short-term biodiversity gain. for very little input. So it's a quick win. Even just stopping mowers, cutting an amenity grassland and letting it grow long, immediately you're creating cover for small mammals. As I say, inverts will feed bats, and you haven't gone to all of the chew for having to create something really, really special. So that's a kind of way around that. I think with on Emma's question with regarding to the strategy. Sorry, Emma, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say there. I do apologise. I'll have to come back to you, Emma, on that one. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, it has turned into a bit of a free-for-all, hasn't it? Okay, I'll just keep going through the hands, and I would say if you don't get a chance to speak, please do use the chat. But Stuart, you're next on the list.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart Connor. I'm from University of East London. So I was going to answer Emma, but I'll go for Coy first. So in relation to brownfield land, it is a very complicated one in relation to biodiversity net gain, because potentially it could be categorized as open mosaic habitat on previously developed land, which is a very high distinctive habitat and quite a costly one to redevelop. So it depends what state the brownfield land is currently and what the kind of development plans are. Keeping it sparsely vegetated, it potentially could retain that value. So one thing you could look at, I don't know whether your university would be open to this, would be looking at using that for their kind of biodiversity net gain plans. So if they want to develop other sites, that would be an ideal place to create habitats on, because you can create really high distinctive habitats using previously developed land approaches. We created some guidance for West Midlands Combined Authority about how biodiversity net gain treats open mosaic habitat land and how you kind of create it and sell units. So it might be that it's actually more effective to use that site as your biodiversity net gain kind of delivery site and look at other areas for development. But yeah, I could talk to you about it in more detail if it'd be useful. But I'd actually put my hand up to respond to Emma. So as Kamall said, habitats are a fairly good proxy for species value, so they're kind of a good approach to take. So at UEL, we're a very urban site, so we decided against baseline mapping with BNG because it has less value when it considers kind of urban areas and less kind of variation. So we used urban greening factor as a mechanism to look at the current status of the campus and look at change over time. But we also did something called biodiversity hotspot mapping, where we did specific kind of characterization of different aspects of the campus that we feel as ecologists are really, really important for the biodiversity on the campus. And so we can look at kind of change in that over time. And one of the reasons we did that is because we're a very dense urban campus, that a lot of the kind of biodiversity enhancements are things like bug hotels and bat boxes and bee hotels. And they don't really get kind of characterized from a BNG metrics point of view. So it was a way of looking at that kind of that granularity in more detail and looking at change in that over time.
Definitely monitoring for biodiversity. Yeah, the BNG doesn't specifically include stuff on, like you said, bird boxes or bat boxes or any sort of specific animal criteria that may be present or not present on a site. But the BNG does do is produce a proxy for biodiversity, the net gain unit, based upon botanical structure, which is defined by the habitat types. So yeah, monitoring and managing for assessing net gain will need to include species data to see if biodiversity net gain is delivering at the species level or not.
Okay, I think Ben, your hand's up next.
Yeah, sorry, it is a case of juggling, isn't it? I was going back to Coy's question. So, and of course, things are different in Wales to England. Wales hasn't adopted biodiversity net gain. So when the site's developed, a green infrastructure strategy will have to be made for it. So there will be looks it will be looked at to see how improvements can be made, and you will need to make a green infrastructure statement. But what I'd say, it's probably worth chatting to the planning ecologist at this stage, baseline the site and take this as what you're looking to develop the site from, and then put some short-term biodiversity gain in there anyway. So I'm not sure which site. Sorry, I'm in Swansea as well. I'm at Swansea Uni. But yeah, sort of chatting to the local nature partnership, sort of looking at how the site can be used. Rough grassland's great. Wildflower areas can be established really quickly and cheaply, and potentially moved as well when developments come in. I had one of a wildflower garden that I developed on one of my campuses on a place that should never have been developed, and then a few years later it was decided to put a new building there, and as part of that development they actually moved and enlarged the wildflower garden, and that worked pretty well. So you might be able to put some temporary biodiversity gain in that could be moved and incorporated into the new plans potentially. But I'd suggest, yeah, baseline it as it is now, and then hopefully you can persuade people that anything you do in the meantime is a benefit but won't stop that development in the future.
Thanks, Ben. No, that's really insightful, because it's our Swansea campus this pertains to. So yeah, that could work really well.
Thanks, Ben. Ian?
Hi, I did actually drop back in there. I did remember. With regards to our strategy, recording biodiversity can be extremely daunting because we have over 1,000 species. And if you think, well, do I have to monitor for those 1,000 species every year? It's virtually impossible to do that. So what we do is, within our strategy, we do have target species, and we use those target species as an indicator of sort of biodiversity health around the estate. Tree sparrow is a good example, where we've just put up a number of tree sparrow boxes in 2 different locations. So we will monitor. We have a baseline where they were here in the past. We'd lost them. We're actually starting to get them back. So rather than going for the whole suite of farmland birds, tree sparrow would give us an indicator of how good our land, our arable area of land is. And we would, it kind of saves resources that you can focus on certain species to get an indicator of health. Barn owl was another one. Counting how many barn owl pairs we get. Woodcock was another one where we thought it was extinct on the estate. It's now back on the estate. So from that baseline, you can target certain species and use them as indicators of health. So that's what we're doing at Durham.
That's great, Ian. Thank you. Has anybody got anything else they want to throw in while we're here? It's a bit crazy at the moment, I realise. I've not chaired particularly well this time. I think that there's been a lot of conversation though, and I think that it might be worth playing this back afterwards if there's anything you want to take from it, because I think we jumped around a little bit. But some really good conversations, I think. Certainly great to hear what everybody's doing. Just as a final thing from me then, does anybody have any final thoughts or anything they want to pitch in before I give back to Claire to do the usual EAUC plugs? No? Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. Claire?
Thanks, Mike, and thanks to Ben and Kamall for presenting everyone's discussion. As I said, it is being recorded, so I'll share the recording and also the links people have been sharing in the chat. I'll make sure they're included. A couple of things from EAUC. Our Scotland conference takes place in Perth on the 31st of March. It is our Scotland conference, but it is open to the wider UK and Ireland. So if Perth's relatively straightforward for you to get to, then please do attend. I'll pop the link in the chat, and also I'll include it in the notes. And then our main conference, the EAUC annual conference, is the 22nd to 24th of June at Swansea, and Ben's got his screenshot of the nice beach near them. So bookings are open for that. I'll share that link. Green Gown Awards applications open on the 14th of April. So you will be sent some details about that. And for our Welsh members, there is a workshop this Thursday about responding to the consultation, which the Welsh Government of the call for evidence on the future of tertiary education in Wales. That's on Thursday at 2 p.m. And any of our Irish members, we have a branch meeting on Wednesday at 11 a.m. And I think those are the key bits. As I said, I'll share the links with you to the conferences, and also we have various community practice and regional meetings taking place throughout the rest of the spring. So I'll share those links as well. I think that's it from me. Thanks. Oh, other than I'm just going to pop. Sorry, I do have one more thing. I'm going to pop in the chat the post-meeting survey. It's very short. It's 2 questions. We've been talking about surveys. It's really helpful for me and Mike if you cannot fill it in, because one of the questions is about future meter topics. And it's great to get the discussion taken off the Gistmail, but it is also really helpful if we can have some feedback from members about what particular areas that you want to discuss. And if you have any suggestions of speakers, they can be external. If you think that, if you've heard them speak and you think that they're relevant, please do pop that in the survey. That'd be really helpful. And then that is my last comment. Thanks.
Well, on that, I think we say great to see everybody, and I'll see you all again soon.